Hello YouTube, Amethyst Pony speaking, and today I'll be reading for you The Foal Necromancer Soul's Rebirth by Bold Promise on fanfiction.net. The link to the fanfiction will be included in the description below. If I do not remember, please comment and remind me. This will be the first reading I've done on YouTube on this account and at all, so please be nice, and I'm sorry if I get quiet or monotone because it's 12:17 and everyone is asleep. I'm also sorry if you start hearing my dog in the background. She is also asleep. With all that said, let's get on to the description, so you can decide if you want to actually join me on this reading of The Foal Necromancer. The Foal Necromancer, Soul's Rebirth is tagged with gore, dark, slice of life, alternate universe, and human. That said, I do not know if it will hold up to this or if it will fail miserably, but it has received good reviews on fanfiction and is a sequel to the very well acclaimed Foal Necromancer. I want to make a better iteration, improving on the original Foal Necromancer. I wasn't going to do a cardboard cutout, and I wasn't going to settle for anything less than making something at least somewhat as entertaining as the original, while at the same time trying some things that I didn't find done in the original at all. Must not spoil. Which I found a damn shame. What happens when a century-and-a-half-year-old master of the forbidden arts lands in Acaristia? Obviously, a lot of dark humor. What happens if it turns out that his reanimation spell actually short-circuited and turned him into a foal? And Princess Luna decided to try to show the poor sod a new way of life. Hopefully, Acaristia will survive, and hopefully I won't fuck this up much at all. Either way, may Faust have mercy on my soul. Darkness, dampness, the biting cold of winter within a long abandoned crypt, and the smell of a mass unearthed, rotting, shambling corpses faithfully standing guard. A normal person would avoid such a place. For me, however, it's home sweet home. It might not present the most lavish of accommodations, but I'm not complaining. All I require is shelter, and this is the safest place I've found in centuries. I've had my metaphorical eye on it for even longer than that, only moving in when I knew the time was right. My suspicions had been proven correct when not a week had passed after I moved out of my old lair before the king had sent forth another squadron of heroes, only finding a nice, toxic surprise waiting for them. When I arrived in the aftermath, I'd find them equipped with just the right scrolls and ingredients for counting my rebirth spell. They finally found out how to get rid of me once and for all. It's been years since then. I fortified this labyrinth cavern to the point where none but the suicidal would dare come to challenge me. Luckily, such desperate fools are never in short supply. Otherwise, I'd get bored. Now, however, my luck is drawing thin. King Bolvar has organized another team of executioners for me, and I fear these might actually have what it takes to bring me down. Fortunately, however, I'm now almost finished preparing for my final escape. I've grown tired of the constant hounding and bleak existence here. Since it seemed there was no place for me in this world, I've decided to find another one. They called me so many things since I lost my name. Abomination, unholy wretch, undead fiend, demon. Hell, I was even called a god of death by a few pathetic lowlives. It even seemed to catch on for a while, until the good king of the land had decided to put a stop to all the rumors that I wasn't really immortal, only cheating death. Was it Bolvar's father or grandfather? I can't recall. Oh well, I can't be too upset with him, whichever it was. I could always use the practice as well as the fodder. It's not that I lavish in killing that much. It's just that any bit of distraction is always welcome to break the monotony, even if it's from the form of me hearing the same empty threats and having to find some novel way to deal with them. Then again, I would be lying if I didn't grow to yearn for the unique thrill of killing, of getting to decide whether another life ends, of gaining that infinitely meaningful privilege. Of feeling a heart force out its last beats between my finger bones, of seeing a soul rise with the waning body heat. I would try to convince them to move on, But they would never listen. They would always demand revenge for their murder, haunting me, cursing me, trying to defeat me with their eternal abilities being a nuisance in general, considering their deaths being in vain if they couldn't pester me as much as possible. So I'd make them want to never come back. If it was torment that they wanted, then it was torment that they would receive in kind. Suffice to say that a legendary master of death and bender of spirits could take on a legion of weak-minded berserk spirits following any aftermath of any legion of armed soldiers going up against him. It's like a throng of lions would go up against a manticore, followed afterwards by a second wave made entirely of mice. The lions always require some manner of tactics or trump card, but I did manage to find something out, usually. You'd be surprised how easy it is to draw your enemies into the false sense of security. Once they smell blood, they rarely think straight enough to see the trap they're running right into. Or rather, it's just that if blood runs and it smells spreads, scavengers will emerge regardless. The things people do in the name of faith, loyalty, coin, and misguided pride. On the other hand, there would sometimes be the occasional vengeance-driven youngster wanting to honor his parents, lovers, or friends who had previously gone against me. Nothing more I could offer those but a death as quick as I deemed them deserving of. My current lair was a death trap, but there'd still be the occasional suicidal idiot to test it. They could try to find their way through the labyrinth hallway stretching on for yards across different directions, with the runes traps which I'd inscribed on the stones of the walls, floor, and ceiling, in key locations would eventually make sure to at least filter out the especially ignorant and unprepared. At least it offered me some monochrome of peace and quiet. Of course, there were also the undead servants lying in vigil within their graves strewn about throughout, as well as the spiders' dens. Have I mentioned there would also be the occasional oversized spiders lair throughout the maze? They're quite charming creatures once you get used to their appearance, and once they finally learn to stop trying to bite the hand that feeds them. I've once even developed a liking for one in particular. I called it Skitters. It was quite upsetting when it got killed by an adventurer. It was the longest serving minion I've ever had. Subsequently, I decided to kill the culprit slowly. Very slowly. The following days I learned a few new recipes based on spider venom. I also learned just how efficient, as well as entertaining, it could prove to demoralize my enemies before a fight. Now, however, it would seem that none of my defensive preparations were enough. A group of 4 were making their way into my lair, dispatching my guards and sowing every trap. They were most likely the king's heroes I've been expecting. It would even seem that they even wiped out 2 of the spider dens. Poor Annabelle. She had just seen her eggs get destroyed before she died. They were drawing near. It would seem it was finally time. Any moment now, they would appear through the entrance of my living quarters. It was now or never. My quarters had no light shining within. I didn't need any. It wasn't as if I could see by any normal means of sight. I just used definitive magic instead. It's much sharper than any human eye, anyway. Stone walls, floor, and ceiling. The room was rather plain, sans a few spider webs and mosses. I could have spared the time to clean up, but I simply didn't feel the need, though I could stand for less roaches. This used to be the resting place of some general or another whose name I can't be bothered to recall. Now it serves as my shelter, where I spend the majority of my time. I imagine I've grown quite pale since I last afforded to spare the time to leave my work. Oh well, it must be worth it in the end. The only object in the room was a makeshift table made out of the general's tomb. A simple, flat chamber with few words to identify the bones inside, which I've already taken possession of. The entire thing was quite oversized, and offered plenty of leeway for my equipment. Stolen books, tan skin, parchments, notes, runes etched into the stone platform. Stone bowls filled with alchemical ingredients, instruments made of bone, even a few glass tubes. What I wasn't resourceful enough to make, I scavenged from the adventurers outside. If one were to see within the room now, they would notice a dark figure in front of a stone coffin. magical energies pouring from the skeletal hands into 3 suspended crystals, glowing as they filtered and passed the energy into a small crystal about the size of a teardrop. I've charged this uniquely manufactured gem with as much energy as I could for the last 2 months. A maddening monotony, but I decided to err on the safe side. After all, who knows how much power would I require to pierce the boundaries of reality and sustain myself for long enough to find a suitable new home. As the power cut off, the light dimmed, leaving only a small pale light glowing murkily in the dark, emanating from the gem floating in the middle of my incantation circle. I pressed the gem in through the skin of my forehead, where it was absorbed seamlessly. The power was there, only as a mere distraction. The preparations have been done. Now my final necessary step. It wasn't long before the room was lit, revealing me to my executioners. I hope you have a good reason to intrude. At least have it be revenge or poverty. I gestured out with my palm up as I turned around to finally face my invaders. I could feel the fear in their souls upon seeing me, dark robes enveloping me loosely, dark wisps of power flowing out of my sleeves and down my skeletal legs. Underneath my skin stretched across ribs and a stomach stuck to my back. But none of that really bothered me. Necromancy is so very useful. If anything, it offered me an advantage of intimidation. My face most likely seemed almost alien to them. My white locks made me appear as a revenant, but I was not undead. I frowned upon seeing who it was that was employed for my murder. I had assigned my sight spell to see all around myself, if only in lesser detail. There's only a cone in front through which I could see clearly, slightly smaller than the average field of view, but far more acutely. There were 4 of them, a bearded, robed old man with arcane energies boiling underneath his skin and glowing in his eyes, a cleric whose blind devotion made her soul shiver with holy fire, a trapper in the lithe, hooded tunic, using specialized techniques to move about the room unseen, even though it was well lit, and a brutish knight sporting all plate mail armor, including a ridiculous helmet reminiscent of a bucket. Sounds like a D&D campaign. Upon regarding their equipment, I could only notice that my transgressors could have spent less money to prepare to face an elder dragon. Instead, they all came here to face me. I'd be flattered if I wasn't disgusted. So these are the ones who are supposed to go down in history as the ones who had finally slain the legendary living lich. Oh well, suppose it could have been worse. For one thing, at least they didn't have anyone capable of bringing back the recently fallen. Neither do they have any barbarians, thank the gods. Bloody savages. Yep, this is definitely a D&D campaign.